Dear viewers, I am a global nationalist. I support nationalism in my country, India, and in all countries around the globe. Today, I'm going to talk about nationalism in India in general. And what I'll talk about today is about the religious violence that has been in India since independence. Let's begin. Situation in India. Indians would know that it's basically that there are four native religions in India and three non-native religions. These are the four native are Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism, and the three foreign are Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Now, Judaism came to India by Jews being persecuted in other parts of the world, and they came to India for refuge. And there has never been any violence between Jews and the native religions in India, so I won't include them in this. However, there has been violence between Muslims and Christians, and between each other, and between them and the native religions of India. This begins in with the arrival of Islam in India, where uh, Islamic invaders invaded the north of India, and Islamic traders came to the south of India. And the invaders in the north destroyed temples, killed thousands of Hindus, uh, enslaved and raped millions of women and children, and basically conducted wide bloodshed throughout North India and continued to spreading to South India. However, the Vijayanagara Empire pushed them away out of South India, and the Muslim traders who settled in South India were generally peaceful, but they also started converting the local population, sometimes voluntarily and sometimes through force or inducement. So yeah, Islam has not had a good history in India, and this continues to do this day, where the biggest conflicts, religious conflicts in India, involved Muslims and other groups. And within the four native religions, there has not been major conflict. They've all gotten along fairly well. However, they do have some disagreements, but they all come from the same source, which is Sanatana Dharma, which is a way of life in the Indian subcontinent that respects all traditions and believes that all faiths and beliefs are simply different ways of achieving the same state of divinity, reaching out to the divine. So, but in modern India, there has been conflict between Hindus and Sikhs, and between Hindus and Jains, there's been no conflict. But in between Hindus and Buddhists, there has been only uh, very little conflict. I'll explain all this in the next part.
First, I'll start with Hindu Muslim violence because it is the most prominent in India. This is a state-wise breakdown of the number of riots per state. Jharkhand 1, Odisha 1, Gujarat 5, Bihar 3, Assam 2, West Bengal 5, Maharashtra 3, J&K 1, UP 16, Delhi 3, Rajasthan 3, Telangana 1, and Madhya Pradesh 3, Karnataka 6. A total of 53 riots all over India. Very tragic. And there have been 51 terrorist attacks in India. So, uh, what does this breakwise show? First, it shows that uh, most of the riots happen in the northern part of India, in Jharkhand, Gujarat, um, J&K, UP, Delhi, Rajasthan, and Bihar. But there are exceptions. In the east, In the east, in Odisha, West Bengal, and Assam, there have been riots, mostly in West Bengal. In Assam and West Bengal, these riots are caused due to illegal immigration of Bangladeshi Muslims. But in Odisha, I'm not sure why this was caused. I think this was a stray incident. And in central India, like Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, these are not caused due to, and mainly most of the time, haven't been caused due to anything within that state, but mainly as reactions to incidents happening outside the state, such as the Ram Janmabhoomi slash Babri Masjid issue that spread riots throughout India in the late 80s and early 90s. Then in South India, there have been riots in Telangana and Karnataka. Telangana had a one-off riot during the when it, in Hyderabad, when at that time it was part of Andhra Pradesh, which was a response to the Babri Masjid demolition. There were riots at that time in Hyderabad, which is not surprising because Hyderabad has a large Muslim community, and uh, it's also the city where the Razakars, group of Muslims who tried to spread communal violence in India during the partition of India, and uh, so yes, not surprising that there were riots as a response to the Babri Masjid demolition. And in Karnataka, there have been six riots. This is uh, more than being the worst affected state in the south. It's one of the worst in the country, second only to UP. This is because Karnataka has a sizable Muslim population and has historically suffered from Muslim invasions and including people Muslim oppressive rulers like Tipu Sultan. And so Karnataka has responded often to outside um, cases such as the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, but also within. For example, a few years ago in Bangalore, there were riots because by Muslims because of a Facebook post which was derogatory towards Prophet Muhammad, although it was done in response to another social media post that was derogatory towards Krishna. Still, it shows that it's not only being affected by outside issues, but also within. And as for terrorist attacks, most of these are by Islamist organizations, uh, such as Lashkar-e-Toiba from Pakistan, and within India there is the Indian Mujahideen, the Students Islamic Movement of India, SIMI, and these are the ones that are responsible for most of these terrorist attacks. In this, I've not included terrorist attacks on the Indian police or military because I don't really count those as Hindu Muslim terrorist attacks. I'm counting the ones where Hindu civilians were targeted. So let's see. And finally, there was the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits, which occurred in 1990 when Kashmiri Pandits were forced to leave the state of Jammu and Kashmir by the terrorists in Kashmir, Muslim terrorists. So I'll talk about that in the next slide. The deaths and injuries and damages. In the riots, there were 8,700 deaths, 5,267 injuries, and 1,026 properties damaged. For properties, I'm not just referring to houses and homes, but also to vehicles and uh, temples and other religious places of worship. Terrorist attacks, 1,622 deaths, 3,170 injuries. Now, for the Kashmiri Pandits exodus, the um, amount number of deaths I could find were 300 to 700 Pandits killed and 3 lakhs exiled. These are, from what I know, the official numbers, but most uh, unofficial numbers are, for the deaths are much higher. Some journalists and analysts say that more than 1,000 Pandits were killed, and yeah, it was just a terrible thing, and they still have not been able to come back to the to Kashmir, which is a tragedy and a complete failure of the Indian state. And I have spoken about this in a previous video about the Kashmiri Files movie. Uh, you can see it somewhere on the screen here. You can click on it to watch it. Hindu Christian violence. There have been 2 riots in Odisha, and yeah, these are the only 2 Hindu Christian riots in India since independence. The reason is that Hindus and Christians have not had a violent relationship for most part of their history. There was the uh, Inquisition during the Portuguese rule of Goa, but other than that, there has been a amicable relationship between them. But there are issues where Christians try to convert Hindus through fraud, deceit, sometimes through force, and even blackmail, religious blackmail, whereby they threaten the person that they're going to go to hell if they don't convert, which is a form of blackmail according to various anti-conversion acts passed by Indian states. Now, these 2 riots were in response to Christian proselytization, which offended various Hindu groups, and there were also terrorist attacks by Christians against Hindus. The 2 of them, where they one was where they killed one priest in a temple, and another was where they killed a priest and a few 4 others of associates in a temple. Deaths and injuries and damages. These are mainly from the 2 riots, 90 deaths and 18,050 injuries, and 7,525 properties damaged. Terrorist attacks, 5 deaths, 12 Hindu ashrams, schools, and orphanages. This is related to the first terrorist attack I was talking about, where after the killing of that Hindu priest, 12 of his ashrams, schools, and orphanages were also attacked. Hindu Sikh violence. There are a number of riots per state. Delhi 2, Punjab 1, Haryana 1, Uttar Pradesh 1, Madhya Pradesh 1, Bihar 1, Karnataka 1, total 8. These are mainly the ones that happened during the uh, anti-Sikh riots after the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi by Khalistanis, and these were done by Congress workers in various states, and it was really a terrible thing where a large number of Sikhs were killed. Why? And as for the one incident in Karnataka, I'm not sure about it. So total 8 riots. There were also terrorist attacks by Khalistanis on common Hindus. There were a number of terrorist attacks at 17. The deaths, injuries, and properties damaged from the riots, 5,020 deaths. Most of these are plus deaths. Most of these are from the anti-Sikh Congress-sponsored riots, but also from various few other riots. Injuries 500 plus, and from Khalistani terror attacks on Hindus, 653. This whole episode of Hindu Sikh violence occurred during the 80s and 90s. It's now over and a done issue. Hindu Buddhist violence. Maharashtra, one, and that's just one. Deaths, injuries, properties damaged, 6. Injuries, 113. Properties damaged, 70. This riot occurred in the 1970s in Maharashtra, in a certain district called Worli, which it was at that time ab- had a lot of small houses, small uh, settlements for poor people, a slum basically. And within this, there was large unemployment, which caused the growth of various gangs. And so, uh, the Shiv Sena created Hindu gangs, and then during this time, the Congress party, which was ruling, started creating reservations for Dalits and lower castes, which angered uh, upper castes who supported Shiv Sena, and there were riots against Dalits and also from by Dalits against upper castes. But this was those Dalits were mainly Buddhist worshippers, so that's why I included it.
So, uh, those are all the various incidents between the groups. What I want to finish with is that basically the reasons why this violence has occurred, this senseless violence, in my opinion. Um, One of the major reasons is because of the historical issues that have been continued to exist in India have not been resolved. These predate the constitution but still affect our lives, and the Indian government, both the central and the states, need to work with the communities to resolve them peacefully. Even now, after the Ram temple has been uh, okayed by the Supreme Court to be built, there are still issues of other mosques which have been built on the ruins of temples, such as the Mathura Mosque, and there is a demand amongst Hindus to have these removed and the temples rebuilt. There are thousands of mosques which are built on Hindu ruins, and I think it would be a good gesture of the Muslim community to give these eh, lands back to Hindus because they already have other mosques which are not built on temple ruins, and they can rebuild these mosques they use in other areas. I think the template given by Supreme Court for the Ayodhya issue can be followed in other similar issues. So yeah, these historical wounds need to be healed by the government. And another issue is the lack of freedom of speech in India. While we do have freedom of speech guaranteed by Article 19, Clause 1 of the Constitution, it's unfortunately not enforced by the government, where a lot often if someone is offended by something that person says, they can bully the government into censoring that person. Luckily, the judiciary tends to support and protect the freedom of speech of people, but the executive has not been very successful at that. And so, how this affects religious violence is because if somebody is offended by some mark by another group on their religious gods or figures, then they feel that they can force that person to silence themselves. And if that person doesn't, then they can engage in violence. There is a certain belief that this is justified. Of course, this is not done by all communities. This is mostly been seen by Muslim communities, but also the Hindu community, where, for example, famous painter M.F. Hussain, who painted paintings of Hindu goddesses, which certain Hindu groups deemed offensive. He had death threats, but was luckily never killed, but he was living outside of India for his own safety and died outside of India very tragically. So, yeah, we need to allow people to speak and express themselves, even if that means offending the religious sentiments of people. Only then will people not be tempted to take the law into their own hands. And yeah, that's the law. That's the final point I want to make is that both the police and the legislature and the judiciary need to work together to enforce law and order. The, the parliament and state legislatures need to pass laws that punish people who engage in religious violence, who threaten others with religious violence, and the executive has to increase the number of police, increase their uh, ability and their tools and t- that they can use to control crowds. If religious riot begins, they should be able to uh, fire at people if necessary. Although I do prefer that they use peaceful methods to control people, but if there is no choice, and they should fire to protect other peaceful civilians. Then the judiciary has to uh, get more judges appointed into the various vacancies within it. Of course, this is done by the executive, but the judiciary does advise the executive on this matter, so it has a role. And within the judiciary, they can fast track these cases of uh, riots and terrorist attacks so that people feel that, not feel, they know that if they have their religious freedom, their right to worship violated, they can approach a court and get justice. Because the reason why people, not everybody, but some people take the law into their own hands is because they believe that they won't get justice in the legal manner. So, if that fear and anxiety can be assuaged, then we may see a great reduction in religious violence. So, yeah, these are the three solutions I've thought of. Of course, I'm not a genius on these matters, and I'm sure that you would have your own ideas, and therefore, I would like you to comment below and let me know what you think. And yeah, I just want to end this by wishing good luck to my country, India. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to see other videos about Indian nationalism in general, click here. If you want to see my previous videos, click here. If you want to see the sources I use for this video, click the links in the description below. Thank you for watching. Vande Mataram.